welcome once again. You are listening to the voice of Free Arcadia, and we have such a fantastic doubleheader for you if you're watching on facebook.com/Leijiverse. Again, Julien Pirou is joining us, and as always, I'm here with my crusty, a little crusty. It's Chad. I fit the same description, so no big deal. Chad, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Just winding down from my Friday of work, drink in hand.
Yes, and I'm winding down from an adventurous week in general as well. So we'll be sharing some drinks here. And again, like I said, Julien Pirou, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine and happy to be here.
Excellent. Awesome. And today we have another fun and exciting topic. Like I said, Free Arcadia is an opportunity for us to take deep dives and get lots of varying opinions on Leijiverse matters, like fantastic movies that came out for the Leijiverse. And today I really wanted to tackle what I believe is the perfect gateway drug into the Leijiverse. It's just the right size. It's just the right production quality. It's very accessible, a wonderful dub, depending on how you feel about dubs, and just a lot of opportunity for people to dig in. Galaxy Express 39, or as Julien recently found out, it was released under the title Bonjour, Galaxy Express 39 in America, contradicting the sequel movie, Adieu, Galaxy Express 39. So if you hear us say Bonjour, Galaxy Express, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the first movie. Before we get into the plot points, I really want to take everybody beat by beat throughout the entire movie and take a real deep dive into the story itself. But before we do that, I'd really like to set things up by talking about the context of this movie and why it's important and how it came to be. One of the first things you'll notice about it is directed by Rintaro of Studio Madhouse, a very prolific anime director, a very infamous anime director in a lot of ways, who brought his extremely bold vision to the Galaxy Express world. Does anybody have anything to say about Rintaro?
I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining. No, you're not allowed. It's a podcast where you talk. So now you need to tell us, because you've created curiosity and this is not allowed. You need to expand on this. What are your thoughts?
I honestly think that Rintaro is very exceptional and, like you said, bold in his vision. Mm-hmm. But he also throws a lot of original context and color of his projects right into the freaking trash.
Into the trash? What do you mean by he throws his own?
No, not
color?
His own. Someone else's.
He kind of discards of things which he does not personally find important to his story away in favor of his own vision. Right.
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So that's just my opinion.
Well, before we get into how you feel about that within the context of Bonjour, Galaxy Express, Julien, how do you feel about Rintaro?
Is clearly for me, is one of the great directors of Japanese animation. I'm a huge fan of his version of Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis.
Okay,
is one of my favorite animated movies, and of course, as a fan of Leiji Matsumoto, Rintaro has a special place because he directed the original Captain Harlock series. He directed both Galaxy Express movies, or at least the two first ones. He didn't do the third one, which is a bit apart, and so he did Endless Odyssey, which is a topic we touched upon a little in the previous episode. So I think he's a very important director. What's I think interesting is that it's not, when Galaxy Express 39 is done, the first movie is not yet Madhouse does not, I think, exist yet. So
right.
The movie is being done by Toei Animation.
Right.
But even if Rintaro is very young, you would not know that seeing the movie, because there's always such a strong directorial style.
Yeah.
that even through the Matsumoto, I mean, there's all the story beats you'd expect from a Leiji Matsumoto story, but still, you can see that it's a Rintaro movie already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, being from Rintaro and that being so in your face, Chad, how do you feel that Rintaro impacts this movie without giving too much of the movie away at this point?
As far as this movie goes, I haven't read the original manga of this. I was primarily thinking about the Captain Harlock series versus how the Captain Harlock manga goes. It's drastically different, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that you feel that's the same sentiment you have towards 3-9 is that this isn't really, if you're expecting to get pure Matsumoto, this isn't the place to go for it.
To a degree.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's also the themes in 3-9 is extremely Matsumoto. Like the overall morality of it, it's extremely in his eyes.
They're two strong flavors, Rintaro and Leiji Matsumoto. And when you mix them together, it's definitely an interesting combination because you might have, if you mix two strong flavors, they're kind of trying to suppress each other maybe, or maybe they'll become even more potent. There's sort of, and maybe that's to taste, to the viewer to decide. What I think, going back on my original point here is why it's such an accessible gateway to the Leijiverse in and of itself is you have these strong flavors, you see Matsumoto's points, and you feel Rintaro's extremely creative mind, which lends itself, I think, very well to the Galaxy Express universe. There's a lot of toys for Rintaro to play with, and I think he plays with them very well. And even if somebody were to ask me, I want to get into Captain Harlock, where should I start? I would still say this movie. Captain Harlock is the first discernible face you see in this movie. And he's not the focal point. The focal point is you can really live through Tetsuro. And Tetsuro is the audience stand-in taking us on this adventure. And instead of being Harlock, when you're in a movie, you're looking at the main character, you may be trying to experience what the main character is experiencing. And I think Harlock may be better digested not as the main character, but as an accompaniment to the main character so that you can feel those fatherly sort of overtones, those leader sort of overtones of Harlock. And I think it's a better way to digest the character.
Well, one thing I wanted to go back a little bit because you said there's two flavors in the movie, but actually there's three flavors, and the third flavor, and it's always often overlooked because maybe it's not so much as a household name as Rintaro and Matsumoto, but it's Komatsubara Kazuo, who was a character designer and animation director on the Galaxy Express movies, and later on Mugen Kido SSX and Arcadia of My Youth, and he's a giant of. He's a legend. All character designers that came after, like Nobuteru Yuki and so on, are all looking to this man and saying, like, he basically invented what character design is about in animation. When it came to taking the characters Matsumoto drew on the page and making them into characters that could move and live on screen.
Character design. Yeah, character design being so much different than drawing a manga. You're constantly rotating basically cubes and spheres and cylinders, and you can't really do that easily with the traditional, what I call the manga nouveau style of Matsumoto. It's a lot more difficult. And you're exactly right. I think that's what makes SSX my preferred anime, Harlock anime series, is specifically that character design. Whereas the original, do you know who designed the original Captain Harlock?
I think it was already Komatsubara, but he had basically he was sticking much closer to Leiji style. And in Mugen Kido SSX, you feel more Komatsubara and a little less Matsumoto.
Yeah, and I think the characters move and breathe and live a lot better because of that sort of overtaking of Matsumoto's style in favor of perhaps his own, or a more harmonious blend, so to speak.
It's better suited to animation.
Sure. Another interesting thing that we should talk about before getting into the movie is the manga. So it goes from a manga to a television series to a movie. And so those are multiple translations. And it's also the longest running Matsumoto work from my knowledge. And it also, contradicting most other Matsumoto works, is that it has multiple closed arcs, which many Matsumoto works, including the original Captain Harlock manga, it is not complete. So there's something to that. I mean, has Matsumoto ever spoken on that? Does anybody have any thoughts on it?
I think Matsumoto, he prefers short stories to long story arcs. And in Galaxy Express, he managed both, actually, to have like each episode he drew, he could be on another planet and telling a sort of one-shot story of Tetsuo and Metal encounter some weird people on that planet.
They're very episodic, or sort of like...
And work on a sort of longer goal of that journey, but not having that being the main focus. So he could really do what he likes, which is whatever comes to mind in the next planet.
I mean, it's a lot more interesting for the creator in contrast to Space Pirate Captain Harlock, the manga, where it's just the Leiji panels behind every single character design. And I'm sure that might get a little uninteresting for Matsumoto after some time, to not have the characters in unique worlds with unique situations happening every time. It's just this long sort of opera about the conflict with the Mazone, whereas, like you said, in 3.9, different planet every day. So planet of the week rather than monster of the week.
What's also interesting is that the manga started, I think, in 77 of Galaxy Express, I mean. And it ended in 81. The first movie was released in 79. So basically midway through the publication of the manga. So it's interesting because it shows that even if Matsumoto is clearly not the best at concluding his stories and ending his stories, usually you get the feeling he makes it up as he goes a bit. But for Galaxy Express, it shows that 2 years before the manga ended, he actually had a pretty clear idea where he was going with his story. So that's also notable.
So maybe he came into 3.9 with a much more complete idea that he wanted to present, but an idea that also allowed him to explore lots of different facets of his imagination. So very interesting. And it is in a recent poll in Japan for the most popular Matsumoto mangas, this ranked as number 2, right behind Space Battleship Yamato, which definitely had a everlasting impact on Matsumoto's career. And sort of the themes of Yamato are more closely linked to the rebirth of Japan and Japan's miracle economy. There's a lot of deep sentimentality and sort of a source of strength for the country in Yamato that may not be quite as apparent in 3.9, which is more of a personal story of a boy growing into a man. So this movie is pretty long, I would say. It is 2 hours and 8 minutes long. That is... I never find it to be much of a slog, but what I would say is that I think they could have cut down the length of this movie simply by putting some of these animations on 1s instead of 2s. You know, I sometimes make GIFs for the Leijiverse page, and I will speed up an animated sequence, and the quality sometimes just explodes. And I'm wondering, you know, why did we have to drag things out? And we could have just had the train fly by and look magnificent for an animation in the early 80s. Just a thought. I mean, what do you guys feel about the length of this movie?
I don't mind the length at all. Like, to be completely honest, I feel like if they start cutting back on the content, it may actually be hindered because, that doesn't give as much time to view the train in flight. And to be completely honest, a lot of the interactions, you kind of need that time to savor what's going on. I think that adds to the whole nouveau feeling. It's kind of like the whole majesty of presentation on it. But that's me.
Yeah, I guess I'm not saying I want content cut so much as I would like to see it animated on ones, meaning movement every frame instead of what is traditional in anime, animating on every 2 frames, or at least it was up until, things like Akira really had a lot more motion and movement. And I'm not sure if maybe the studio wanted a certain runtime or what's up with that. And there's a lot of recycled animation in this movie too. Which I'm not necessarily against, but I would just say there were some of these animated sequences of the train launching are just magnificently drawn, but sometimes the choppiness kind of throws me off. I don't feel the choppiness needs to be there. It could have been sped up. We could have had a 100-minute movie with some of those sequences sped up. But that's just me. I don't know. Julien, any thoughts? Do you feel like Chad or?
Yeah, I think personally, I like Chad. I actually think that the movie does never feels too long. I mean, there is, and I think we'll talk about it. A feeling that the sort of last arc in the story comes after what feels like the climax of Tetsuro's tale. But apart from this. I think that you have to remember that Toei Animation was mostly doing animation for TV. They did a few films, of course, but all their processes were geared to a kind of production that had to get 1 episode each week on screen.
Yeah,
and I think that as Galaxy Express is usually considered a very important milestone in Japanese animation because that's a very ambitious, a very epic, very important movie in terms of production. It was a huge success as well, but it was done by animation teams that came from TV, and so they used the techniques they were familiar with. And I think that's the movie, and I see what you mean about sometimes the choppiness of the animation. It's still a bit in between, like in between the TV quality and movie quality. It's not, but because this movie happens, you can get some spectacular things a few years later, like the Macross movie and stuff like that, who really went all movie style and But Galaxy Express was the first step that needed to happen to sort of open the possibilities for Japanese studios.
Yeah, and that whole concept of animating on 1s versus 2s sort of evolving from there and perhaps just not on their mind at that point. And then we're living in a post-Akira world where there's so much animation on 1. That aside, now there was cut content from this when it reached American shores. The original release, alternatively titled Bonjour Galaxy Express, like I said, cuts about 30 minutes, and instead of Tetsuro, features Joey Hanakana Boba Commanda Smith. A very interesting change in the name, almost offensive. Very sort of American take on the pronunciation of Japanese words right there. And it's kind of just part of the legacy of the Leijiverse's mistreatment when it reaches United States shores. And it was not alone in being mistreated, but it definitely had its perhaps a disproportionate share of mishandling in contrast to other animes of the time. But it was one of the first animes, if not the first anime, shown in American movie theaters. So absolutely a historic piece. Chad, any other thoughts on Galaxy 39 as just a piece of work?
Well, like you were just stating, there was a lot of mishandling, in
Mhm.
its immigration from one side of the world to the other. I think I'm a little biased in the rationale as to why. There's a lot of politics at that point in time.
Mm.
Um, the West was not ready for possibly not listening to the government. And there's a lot of anarchist basis on a lot of these series and films. So probably wasn't hitting a lot of positive notes for people
Yeah.
in production and entertainment industries.
The concept of paradise law comes up a couple times, which is very anarchic, I guess. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but we'll get into that as we discuss the beats. Julian, any other thoughts on just this movie as a whole?
Not really much more than what has been said. I
Sure.
think another movie which was very badly handled when it was imported was Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind
Mm.
from Miyazaki, which was released as Warriors of the Wind, the Princess of the Wind, and horrible edits every time. So yeah, it was a particular era in time where, for instance, the people importing these movies felt like it should not be more than 1 hour and a half. So let's
Mhm.
cut anything that makes it longer than that, and stuff like that feels a bit arbitrary. But yeah,
Yeah, and they could have done it like, just speed up the film, I think, in a few segments, and it looks better and would fulfill their needs as well. So maybe a lack of creativity on their part, but no lack of creativity from Rintaro and Leiji Matsumoto in this movie. And let's get into it with the opening words: "Before humanity was born into this world, to this world, the stars shone in the heavens. Long after humanity is gone, the stars will continue to shine." And basically, what I get from this is right off the bat, Matsumoto is telling you, "Hey, kid, you're gonna die." I mean, this is such a brutal introduction to the idea. I mean, especially for an American child. Now, the concept of death may be more openly discussed amongst children in Japan, but what are you guys' thoughts on telling kids they're going to die?
I think that specifically in that generation, death was a little bit more accepted. I mean, how many of their family members didn't exist? Like completely
Yeah.
wiped out. And
Yeah. Post World War II.
that's sort of, I don't know, like a treatment for their trauma. Maybe they needed that kind of salve. Like, hey, things have been rough. Things are just irredeemable and grim at times, but it's going to get better.
and I am reminded of I don't remember exactly about what it was, but there was a comparison I read once of the difference between how children characters are handled in American movies compared to British movies,
Mm.
and a feeling that in American movies, children are like kings, like they are untouchables, but in British movies, children characters can go through hell, and American is like, yeah, you're a child, you need to be protected, and British are like, kids, life will be tough.
Yeah.
Grow up as fast as you can. And I think there's a bit of that in Japan as well, and it probably has to do with the fact that in this World War II legacy, Japan was heavily bombed during World War II, as the United
London.
Kingdom was.
Yeah.
So there's indeed this feeling that, yeah, life can be very tough. Get ready for it as soon as you can. So
Yeah.
no gloves.
Yeah, we did not receive the homeland bombings that the Japanese and the British experienced. Our experience with bombing in America was relegated to a far off island, which probably 90% of Americans never go to, if that's probably generous. So we are very disconnected from the concept of death. In many ways in America. And that in and of itself might have been a wall to get over for publishers and theaters or TV stations alike. Very, very difficult for them to come to grips with it. Jazz is amazing. So I want to say my next point about Galaxy Express is the soundtrack is, in this movie specifically, maybe the S tier, top of the pop musical soundtrack of any Leijiverse work. I mean, what do you guys think of the music in this movie?
Well, the composer, Nozomi Aoki, who did the music for the TV series, but here on the movie, I think he really had the means to work and do something very, very special. And it's sometimes it's jazzy, sometimes you can hear the sort of classical music influence and references that I think were very dear to Matsumoto's art, because he's a classical music fan, and yeah, actually in Japan he illustrated some classical music compilations and stuff like that. Basically, Nozomi Aoki at his best doing this soundtrack. I think the soundtrack for Adieu Galaxy Express, so the second movie, is also pretty good. It's not by Nozomi. It's a very different. It's more John Williams like.
Okay, yeah, a little more Star Wars influence in there.
But here, what's pretty cool is that it is a movie score. It has this sort of production value, but it has the style and sound of the Galaxy Express universe as seen on TV. So I think for people coming to the movie, it was very nice to have this sort of familiar style, but like pumped up to the next level.
Yeah, it's definitely got that classical feel to it, but as far as jazz is concerned, we're talking about big band jazz, perhaps these large orchestras of jazz, and there is that classical tinge to it, and even that John Williams sort of Star Wars vibe to it. But for me, it's the jazz that cuts through. It's a very sentimental, and it kind of Americanizes it a bit. I mean, jazz being our musical, what America can say is American music. That's the closest we get, really. And maybe there's something to that very American influence on, and the same way as the industrialization of Japan in and of itself being very influenced by American innovation in trains and planes and automobiles. So. But what we know right off the bat in this movie is that dystopia is bad. Nobody likes a dystopia. This is the first sweeping scene we get in Galaxy Express is featuring the outskirts of these highly technological megalopolis, the outskirts of megalopolis, where the slums exist and where Tetsuro exists. There's a strong contrast to what we'll later see. What do you guys feel about the concept of dystopia in Galaxy Express?
Well, specifically, this dystopia is entirely fascist and racist. If you're a human, essentially, unless you bow down and lick boots, you're going to be scavenging, killing, and stealing just to live, and that's kind of horrible.
Yeah, strong bias again. It's a transhuman led, not trans, but transhumanist. What I'm speaking on is the idea of mankind becoming mechanized in and of itself. I believe I'm using that word correctly. Transhumanist idea of, and it's become we do not. The flesh do not judge the mechanical. It is the other way around. The mechanical judge those with flesh. And what we see very soon is a random couple of mechanized humans literally just casually spitting on the fleshy humans on the staircase as they walk down to purchase their pass on the Galaxy Express 39. But like I said, Captain Harlock is the first face that we see in this movie. And like I said, that's why I think you get a good, strong vibe of Harlock. He's sort of circling this movie, and you're trying to catch him where you can. But Julien, I spoke with you, and you were talking about how Harlock wasn't really featured character in the original manga. I believe he's featured in the TV show, but maybe I'm wrong. Can you speak on that?
No, in the manga and the TV show, there's at some point there's a fake Captain Harlock that Tetsuro encounter, which actually looks a lot like the Yamato version, meaning that it's just a guy like with a black cloak on his face, pretending to be Harlock, but he's actually a machine with the delusion of being Harlock. Yeah, it's fun. I was wondering how much a surprise it was for Japanese people going to the cinema and to have this, as you mentioned, right off the bat, this wanted poster with Harlock's face on it. The first thing you see. Yeah, in Japan, I think it was advertised that Harlock was going to be in the movie. So it was, I guess, not a big surprise, but still the movie gets that out immediately. So it's like, be sure he'll be there.
Well, like we were talking about Harlock winning polls of favorite shonen character the year that he came out. Harlock really may not have been the dominating force in Matsumoto's career in Japan, but that was a great way for them to build hype for this movie and get people excited to experience it because he was a very beloved character.
I just wanted to go back a little bit to what you were saying about the dystopia and like Chad said, you really get this fascist style when Tetsuro is being chased by these troopers in the streets, and they really it's like a death squad, as you really have this imagery of fascist troops. But there's something else, and actually, because I'm keeping an eye on the chat I
appreciate it,
and there's something that so I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and I'm sorry if I don't, but Pitayapon Mu Tobundit. I hope that's more or less that.
Pitayapon. Okay, yeah.
Mentioned something about the parallel between the situation with humans and machines and occupied Japan versus Americans. And I think there's something to it, because when we watching the movie, you could actually see this. When you see the machine men in the train station, they look, their clothes, their style is very westernized. And so you get the feeling like children, it's very Dickens. You have the poor children in the streets and so on. But the children could be a representation of post-war Japanese culture in a way. And so you could actually have a reading of the movie as mechanization is Americanization in a way.
Sort of like industrialization. And we were talking about, there's that Americanized soundtrack with jazz in it. And that's a very astute observation. I think maybe we are kind of connecting this here.
Yeah, and that basically, if you see it that way, maybe the movie is telling you it's tempting to have a better life by becoming more Americanized, but do not throw away your Japanese culture, your Japanese soul. And that's actually a theme you can see in some other Matsumoto works, like in Gun Frontier, for instance, where Toshiro finds some women of his clan who, to survive in the West, married rich ranch owners and stuff like that. And there's some discussion about, are you basically rejecting your Japanese culture to blend in? So in this light, that could be a reading of the movie where it's actually a reflection on for a better life, how much of yourself and your culture and your origins and so on you are willing to sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, especially, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting you, Chad, but I'm definitely, that was a part of Japan's history leading up to World War II, the appropriation of Western ideals and how that helped them achieve a more efficient society, perhaps, but that led to its own sort of greed and corruption there. Chad, any thoughts?
Just on that topic, that's actually, Julien, that's exactly what happened. I mean, there were a lot of back alley surgeons that would alter eye shapes
Oh,
to look more American. And it was just one of those things, like the whiter, the more American you looked, the more accepted you were. And it was exactly that. You were essentially giving up and altering, cutting yourself into something you weren't.
yeah, definitely. And this is in My Youth in Arcadia as well, where the Illumidos are very hairy, extremely hairy. They get their eyebrows connect to their beards. And this can very easily be interpreted as the American forces occupying Japan after World War II, and just the general squalor and food stamp, food tickets and food shortages. So a very common theme, like you said, in Leijiverse works. So we see this mechanized couple walking down the stairs, spitting on these fleshy humans, and they go to purchase their pass for the Galaxy Express 39. And Tetsuro and his gang of his ragtag band of fellow kids, many of them shoeless, decide this is the opportunity to jack that pass. And they do so with surprising efficiency and daft maneuvering that helps them achieve their goal to almost to an extent. I'm curious though, would that pass even be valid for them? I guess possibly Tetsuro could sign it. Is this a fool's errand that they're on that does for Tetsuro end up working out? But I always wonder, would he even be able to use that pass? Shrug.
I think it's less to utilize the pass. I mean, he gets his own pass later on, sure. And he says he has to, have it signed. I think that the practiced routine that they have, it's less about utilizing the pass as much as for the sake of vandalism and theft.
Okay.
Just the petty larceny of it is enough to just essentially spit back at them.
Potentially. Just a random thought I had. But so he's essentially stopped by police. Tetsuro takes a punch. Yeah, he gets knocked up by the police and his locket falls off. And this sort of scarab locket with a skull on it. And that falls to Maytel's feet, and she picks it up and offers it back to him. Now, the police seem very lax to, sort of secure this situation for one reason or another. Maybe it's Maytel's presence in and of itself, but she kind of picks this up and returns it to him. And through some more physical misadventure, he ends up kind of worming his way out of the situation and ends up somehow on a motorized skateboard, which the motorized skateboard now very popular. Casey Neistat, very famous YouTuber, made them quite popular for some time. So we're seeing these Matsumoto concepts that are now a commonplace thing, perhaps inspiring a whole generation of engineers to create something like this.
What? Sci-fantasy influencing our future?
In a more immediately recognizable way than say Star Wars, right?
Oh, I was thinking more Star Trek. Their data recovery and storage devices turned into our floppy disks.
Oh, okay, that's very interesting. Any thoughts on the technology that we're seeing here, Julien?
Well, when I was rewatching the movie, I noted that there's a couple of scenes where you see Tetsuro a bit out of nowhere riding some. At some point, it's a rocket bike.
Sure, which also is a thing. Like mopeds, very common. But
my first thought was like, were there toys of that? Like, was that the intent? Because it feels a bit like there's a merchandising thing going on when there's these sort of vehicles. I don't know. I'm not aware of toys of Tetsuro on his rocket skateboard, but I don't. It does feel a bit like why? Where does that come from?
Sure, but as he gets on his motorized skateboard, which can keep up with hovering police cars, and we start seeing machine men cops kind of falling to their doom. We get our first cop murders, basically, from Tetsuro. And we basically begin the Deus Ex Machina, which will be the sort of defining action principle of the Matsumoto movie experience. And from what I can see, we come so close to death only to continually miraculously escape it, as Tetsuro goes up the stairs he wrecks his motorized skateboard, and he has to bail from that, and he sees Maytel at the top of a fire escape, which this young boy is just belaboring up. And somehow he's gotten enough lead on these machine men who have infinite energy that are just sort of trudging up these stairs very effectively. And at the very last minute, Maytel takes Tetsuro into her apartment complex, which this is a very dingy looking fire escape, but her apartment looks great. Her hotel room or whatever it is very fantastic. But on the concept of Deus Ex Machina, how do you guys feel about that as a sort of guiding principle in action films?
I think in this case, you might want to call it the Deus Ex Matsumoto.
Yeah, definitely. Or Deus Ex Machine Men. Julia, how do you feel about Deus Ex Machina?
I think that there are a lot of them in this movie, and even more in the second one. For me, it goes into that feeling that it's really a sort of fairy tale kind of narrative. And you have that right at the beginning. The first shot you have of the Galaxy Express train, it says like, this train carries the hopes and dreams of the young. Mm-hmm. And it's like the movie is telling you right away, like, okay, this is not supposed to be like art sci-fi. This is a metaphor, right? This is a fairy tale. And I think if you see things in this light, the movie is, it's pretty good in any case, but it's much more enjoyable if you just accept it as a sort of myth, rather than a like story where everything is supposed to make sense and
right. It's definitely you need to leave your expectations of what a sci-fi should be, and if you're a hard sci-fi fan and that's the only thing that gets you going, the Leijiverse might not be for you. That might be the issue. But if you are able to let go and you are able to experience something, like you said, a bit more like a fairy tale, I think you'll get a lot more from it than just cool technology or scientific exposition, which there is a bit of. So Tetsuro basically collapses out of exhaustion from this excursion that he's just been on, and Maytel decides that this is a good time to peep in on his dreams, and takes her little compact, takes from her pinky this glowing sort of acid tablet or something, and puts it right on his forehead and starts looking into his dreams. And already we know that Maytel is not to be trusted. She will violate your trust quite easily to get her own way about things. And we're basically seeing in this dream that she's peeping in on Tetsuro's most traumatic experience, the death of his mother. And another thing that people seem to be really taken back by this scene purely because we see Tetsuro with his original eyes that are present in the manga and in the TV show. A lot of people at this point are just super confused. Why does he look so weird in this scene? And it's a bold choice by Rintaro, who knew that he would have a better time with this more traditional looking anime character than the original, which was well suited for television animation per se. Basically, we're seeing the difference between a character model designed for a movie versus one designed for television. But when you cross them over for those uninitiated, it can get confusing. I mean, Julien, what do you think the perception in Japan was at that point?
Well, I cannot answer that because, I never...
Speculate for us here. That's all we can do.
But what I think, it's, in a funny way, you could say, that, okay, so there's hope for us potato guys that you can evolve into Harlock types at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's such an iconic scene in the manga and in the original animated series, and a lot of people were, I mean, right off the bat, it's tragedy, you know, and it's an horrible. Honestly, it's an horrible scene. You imagine you with your mom in a field, and suddenly some guys come and shoot her, and like she's some game, and so I think they decided to keep it as close as possible to the original animated series and the manga, because it was part of the mythology of Galaxy Express, and as a way to say, yeah, Tetsuro looks different in our movie, but it's still the same character. Don't worry. But yeah, they made the choice to go for a more shonen look for Tetsuro, and he's a bit older as well. I think he's supposed to be 14 or 15 in the movie, and for lots of reasons. But also to make it more of an, maybe a bit less of a philosophical journey and a bit more action story.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely,
and so on. It was easier with a teenager character.
Yeah, with a 14-15-year-old, whereas in the TV show, I believe he's 11 or 12 or something along these lines. Chad, please.
It's saying here that the initial showing of Tetsuro, he was 10. And then the later installations, he was 15. So 5 years passed between them of trains.
Yeah. So we have this sort of juxtaposition of old Tetsuro and new Tetsuro, which makes more sense for Japanese fans, but for the uninitiated, be aware this is why. And we see that the murder of Tetsuro's mother by Count Mecha, but leading up to that, Tetsuro's mother is really indoctrinating Tetsuro into this fantasy that she has about the mechanization of her family, and she also seems to cast some shade or at least lament the absence of Tetsuro's father, because she says, well, if he was still here, we'd have already been there. We would have our machine bodies by now. But Tetsuro, in this indoctrination and his love for his mother, exclaims that he will take care of everything. He will get the job at Megalopolis. He will do it. And she says, well, you've got it all figured out there. It's very interesting that his mother sort of sets him up with this idea, this idealism for a mechanized body. And you can see that perhaps, again, this is the desire for the generalized desire of many Japanese after the occupation to become more Americanized. But what we have then after that is the murder of Tetsuro's mother, and she is shot down like an animal. And something to consider is Matsumoto's experience. I believe this is after working on Yamato, where he went on a safari to Africa. Julien, you know what I'm talking about, correct? Can you elaborate a bit on that? Because you're a bit more encyclopedic on these matters.
Yeah, I don't know the details of what he did in Africa, but yeah, he went on a safari. One of the anecdotes he tells is that people, his guides there, were calling him Majimoto, and that become Maji, the mechanic of Harlock's crew.
Oh, okay.
At some point, when Matsumoto had this sort of success, he went around the world. He went. He famously, because he tells a story with a lot of exaggeration, he took the Concorde to go on. I don't know how much of his experience doing a safari in Africa informed the idea of Count Mecha shooting people and taking them as trophies. But yeah, clearly it's an important scene, because so far we have seen the Machine Man as this fascist entity, but here we are seeing that they are on top of that really inhuman and cruel and evil.
Yeah. Well, what I'm referencing more specifically is the anecdote he tells about his trip to Africa and the safari, where he didn't kill an animal on that trip. It's either a gazelle or a bird of some sort. But he pulled the trigger and felt what he says is an immense regret. He had been sort of indoctrinated through Western media, about the idealism of big game hunting and the adventure of going on a hunt and killing an animal for yourself. And he was a big fan of firearms in general, a big military buff. And he went on this adventure and he shot down an animal and felt immediate regret. And from what I would see in this scene is him sort of reliving that experience. But what if he had enjoyed it? Right. And that's sort of the westernized Count Mecha, perhaps the Americanized Count Mecha, taking joy in the kill, and how that maybe there's some more sort of national identity, maybe the idea of there being a gentler way about things, and this idea of hunting for trophies. What is the difference in his mind between hunting the beautiful animal in Africa and hunting humans? Where is the line, sort of? And he sort of blurs this line for us to give us his idea of the morality of hunting for sport.
When it comes down to it on that front, I always compared, like on a personal level, Harlock to being the exact opposite of Count Mecha. Like, Count Mecha, he values certain parts of his humanity that he clings to, his beautiful blonde hair. He's got these hang-ups that he sticks to, and it's like his fancy clothes, it's his friends.
He's got like a pimp hat.
Exactly.
He's got like a pimp hat, I think, something like that. Yeah.
And Harlock is, he has the same type of proclivities, but it's inverted. Like, instead of liking the entourage he keeps around, he likes having a family, essentially. He likes being able to give back.
Yeah.
So I think that when it comes to Count Mecha being a vicious and evil big game hunter that just, doles out these horrible tragedies on individuals' lives, Hardluck is supposed to be the inversion of that, where, he'll take punishment.
He'll step in the way of the bullet for those around him instead of having those around him step in front of the bullet for himself.
Even their skills are almost exactly the same. They're expert marksmen, and they're very they have bravado to the way they do combat.
Yeah,
it's just interesting.
Very interesting. But in this, the locket that we saw earlier in the train station, we see Tetsuro get from his mother, and the locket's very interesting. I'm not sure what, if any, role it plays in the TV series or the manga itself, but it's this scarab, and it's got something of a Harlock skull on it. And so my ignorance with the manga and the TV series, Julien, do you know any significance to this?
Well, basically for Matsumoto, the skull symbol is not necessarily related to Harlock directly. It's a way to say, basically, I will endure.
Right.
Life will be hard, but even if I only have bones left, I will go on.
Yes.
So to have this symbol right there, it's already a sort of again a strong symbol to associate to Tetsuro and his journey. But what's interesting is that, as you mentioned, you have two things. You have the father, who is, we don't know what happened to him in that movie anyway.
Right. Not yet.
But he is really in the situation that many people were after the war, which is fathers who died in the war, and the sons being expected to become the man of the house, basically, and taking care of people. And Matsumoto had this experience. His father did not die during the war, but later, when he was a successful mangaka, he witnessed one of his sisters died in an accident.
Well, he didn't witness it.
He didn't witness it, but he felt that if he had been maybe more successful as a mangaka, since the accident, I don't know the detail because it doesn't.
Yeah, she got in an accident and a procedure would have saved her life, but there was he was not there, and he might not have had the resources to pay for that procedure that would have saved her life. So yes, that's pretty much, I think, what you're discussing here.
And so in a way, that's Tetsuro as this sort of naive maybe view that he will be able to provide for his mother and so his family in general, even if he doesn't not know how, and he will fail 2 minutes later. But the other thing is that because there's this pendant with a skull symbol on it, it already adds this hint that there's more to Tetsuro's father that we know, and he might have there might be something significant about him, even if I don't think Matsumoto had actually any idea of who was Tetsuro's father at this point. But
we don't really either at the end of the next movie, which does discuss it. It is very vague either way.
Yeah, you have to wait to the novels, the Galaxy Express Ultimate Journey novels, where Faust, spoiler alert, Faust's life and how he became is actually explained. But yeah, you have this idea that's seated there, that maybe there's some connection between Tetsuro's father and Harlock, Emeraldas, and the people flying this skull flag and this pirate brotherhood, basically. So probably the idea that's explored a little bit in the next movie, that Tetsuro's father knew Harlock and fought side by side with Harlock at some points in the past and so on. That's seated with this pendant, basically.
Tetsuro wakes up and he overhears Maytel speaking with somebody, a male voice, disjointed, and he approaches and just kind of pops in the shower real quick, and we have our bit of fan service, maybe you could call it. We have our Maytel, sexy Maytel, but his first words to Maytel in the shower are, "Mother?" And begin the Oedipal complex. Begin the difficulty there in the blurring the lines between the feelings of motherly love and a more Freudian take on the matter. Anybody care to elaborate on that interesting topic? Nobody wants to.
I could go ahead and do with that one. The problem with a lot of like content creation in these fields is, you get to detach a certain amount of reality from it. And where, process of the Freudian slips or not slipping, Maytel has his mother's body, but is not technically his mother. It's like, it seems like a cheap way out.
Cheap? For who's being cheap there? What can you elaborate on your cheapness?
To essentially clarify the route in which his mind would be going. You don't have to haggle with your morality. It's not technically his mom.
Yeah.
But there you are.
Yeah.
It's your mom naked in the shower.
which many of us have seen. Julian, what do you say?
It's actually something that when I was rewatching the movie this morning, my wife was watching some parts of it with me, and at this, when there's a revelation at the end, when Metal tells Tetsuro, I am basically living in a cloned body of your mother, and my wife was like, but that doesn't make sense, because all the way people see Metal and recognize her. So if she has like recently put herself in a copy of Tetsuro's mom's body, how can they recognize her?
And it makes even less sense in the manga, right?
But in the manga, you'd never have this particular explanation. That's really specific to the movie, where they tried, I think, at the end, say, well, we have to address why Tetsuro sees his mother in Metal. So Metal say, I have a copy of your mother's body, but that's not something that's in the manga. And actually, that's something that's contradicted by every other Matsumoto works. Tetsuro sees a bit of his mother in this woman, but except in this movie, she's not like a clone of his mother.
Right. Maybe that's some Rintaro right there. Some of the Rintaro flavor, and maybe that's why maybe it leaves that cheap feel in the mouth of Chad. Am I too far off with that assessment?
No, that's pretty accurate.
But more of Maytel being weird. Maytel exits the shower and just flat out tells Tetsuro, yeah, I was peeping on your dreams. Tetsuro's really weirded out by this. And throughout this scene where they're discussing getting on the 3-9, what Tetsuro wants, what Maytel needs, we see kind of a hostage situation occurring. And Maytel really just flat out says it as the cops are banging on the door of her apartment. They've found where Tetsuro is, and they're cutting through the door with the laser cutter, which seems a bit dramatic, but maybe that's necessary with a high-tech door. And she's saying to him, listen, kid, you're either going to get busted by the cops, or I can give you what you want, and you can give me what I want and come with me on this trip. And Tetsuro is basically thinking to himself throughout this, you know what? It doesn't matter if you're death itself. I'm going to do this. So he's not completely stupid, but at the same time, the Stockholm syndrome is there.
Yeah.
I mean,
what were you? Something that's striking when you remember when the movie was done. So in the late 70s. Is that Metal really she has this spy handbook, she has weird devices allowing to do stuff. She has like secret hideouts and safe houses,
sort of like James Bond
places. Yeah, and that's really also very similar to what you'd find in Sexaroid, which was this early sci-fi manga by Matsumoto. So I wonder if all this part is actually a sort of a nod to that kind of atmosphere, that kind of spy feeling that was very popular in that time in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, James Bond definitely popularizing that. And then, like you said, of Sexaroid and many of Matsumoto's works, and Otoko Oiden even has very strong overtones of the untrustworthy, beautiful lady. The beautiful lady who is going to lead you astray for their own whims. Very, very, who hurt Matsumoto is what I wonder. Some beautiful babe in college must have really put him through the ringer or something, because I don't know much about it.
Just wanted to point at this moment where Tetsuro is confusing Metal for his mother, and immediately after he actually tells her you have a mother too, right? And so it's a way also to stress.
Don't you love your mother? Don't you love your mother? Is what he says.
Yeah, your mothers are going to be a topic in this movie. Basically they're telling you keep that in mind. This will come later.
Yeah. But basically in their hostage negotiations, Tetsuro really admits he wants to be like Harlock. And we come back to the theme of Harlock here, which is unique to this movie. That's his ideation of himself. He wants to sail the sea of stars forever in a machine body, which is sort of a childlike take on, obviously Harlock doesn't live his life like that, but his mother told him that's how he should live his life. So he's trying to find harmony in his desires where there can never be any. The cognitive dissonance there that he's going to experience throughout the movie is really clearly set up.
Yeah. And Metal, says Harlock and Emeraldas have become so popular among young people. And it almost felt like a meta commentary on the success of Harlock, especially if he was like voted in a popularity poll before the movie or something. It almost feels like metal breaks the fourth wall there and say, yeah, they are in this movie because they're so popular.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How these Harlock and Emeraldus have won over the youth. Yes. And as the cops are about to break in, Maytel says, "Can you live without regret?" Another strong statement that one of the few important, honest things that Maytel says, maybe one of the only valuable lessons that she may be trying to instill in Tetsuro throughout the movie that isn't completely sort of twisted, is living without regret and moving forward.
And that's something you see immediately after when they get to the 3-9. And the 3-9 is a super cool train going to space and so on. But the way Metal describes it, she says like the train is designed to remind people of past times when things were simpler and happier. And so basically she's telling Tetsuro, in a way, if you look at it with thinking about how it goes, she's telling you, yeah, this train is basically nostalgia, and this train is a trap, in a way. And so, with contrast with what she just said, like, can you live without regret? The Galaxy Express itself is designed to basically entertain the regret in people, the longing for a life without struggle. So it's very interesting to have this juxtaposition between the two scenes, because in a way the movie tells the viewer at this moment that the Galaxy Express might not be a good thing.
Yeah, and it's the representation of industrialization going back to the influence of Western ideals on Japanese culture. And Matsumoto, the thing we need to also keep in mind here is Matsumoto loves trains. He loves all the industrialized things. He wants to be in a machine body personally. He wants to live forever. So this exercise isn't necessarily one-to-one with how Matsumoto believes, but he's able to take his own beliefs and sort of flip them on their head and say, well, what if this was a bad idea? And it turns into his longest running series. And so Maytel flashbangs, and they dip, and they're out of there, and they're right on the train. And like you said, she explains how the train is very advanced, even though it looks old. And we have taking off. Yeah, beautiful, very sort of a spin on. I don't know if that song was ever used in the TV series, but it's sort of, yeah, I didn't think so. So it's kind of a spin on the never-ending journey theme that is present in the TV series, but sort of that signifying that very important moment.
I think after the movie was so successful, they did a sort of alternate opening to the animated series, reusing that song. But the song was done by Godiego, which was a very popular band at the time. And so they did the two songs for the movie. And they are very, very famous songs either in Japan or even, I think it's probably Godiego's most famous songs outside of Japan as well, because of the success of the movie.
So they're taking off and they go through that beautiful animated sequence. That animated sequence being a lot of where I would like to have seen it on ones. That's my own thing. I've sped that up for GIFs on the Leijiverse page, and it's technically incredible what they did there. That the tightness of the train model, the fluidity of this airbrushed sort of train smoke that we're going to see throughout the entire movie is just top tier for its time. Absolutely. Maytel says to Tetsuro, "You'll wish you'd look while you had the chance." And this is Tetsuro sort of brushing that off and saying, I'll have plenty of time for that later. And the sort of ignorance of single-minded youth is on full display. And the youth cannot be bothered with the present. Youth is, this youth is obsessed with his past and his future. But Tetsuro can never really be at peace in the moment.
And at the same time, he's basically taking her at her word. Like he can live without regrets. He can live without looking back.
So the conductor appears. The conductor, one of the most charming characters in the entire Leijiverse. I'm a huge fan of the conductor myself. He's our exposition. He's there to give us, even in the TV show, he's constantly explaining what is happening, what are the regulations. He's there for us to kind of know the rules.
And he's galactic trivia man. Every time you go to a planet, he will tell you something about its rotation, its atmosphere.
And he explains the 1 day stop, the quote unquote 1 day stop, and how a day is very different from planet to planet, and strictly by the book. That's very much his MO. And I didn't note here, but I'm assuming you, Julien, watched the French dub. Did you watch the French dub or did you watch the sub?
No, actually, I only ever saw this movie in subtitled Japanese.
Okay.
But for the anecdote, my website is called triple nine.
Triple-9.fr, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's because the trailer for Adieu Galaxy Express, where with a French voice being very dramatic, saying like, witness a great battle between the Tetsuro and the Machine Empire, blah, blah, blah. Board the 999 for a final journey. And so in France, it was embarqué à bord du 999. And that inspired the name of my website because that sounded so great.
Yeah. Very, very romantic language used here. Very, a narrator that always seems to have something beautiful to say. And our first stop is Titan. And Titan being a moon around Jupiter, which was painfully changed by mankind. Very dangerous place to be, but they turn it into this somewhat of a paradise. Very interesting to note, one of our English examples there, Titan spelled Taitan station when they arrive on it. So kind of funny to note there. And as soon as Tetsuro gets off the train with Maytel, somebody walking by him just gets shot instantly. And following that immediately, Maytel she's shot, it seems, too. She takes some sort of shot, but she's not fatally injured, and she's quickly whisked away by a couple of men. But Tetsuro seems to take a shot, too, but she wakes up at Tochiro's grandma's place, Grandma Oyama, and she explains to them the concept of Paradise Law. In this place, you can do whatever you want, and anybody can do whatever they want to you, too. Paradise Law, anarchy, this sort of idea of not being bound by any sort of written legislation other than a sort of golden rule. And this is very idealized in a few Matsumoto's works. Tochiro always seems to enjoy these types of places, and Grandma Oyama's there too. How do we feel about Paradise Law? And I'd like to hear from Chad on this one first.
I guess I should just come out and say this. I'm anarchistic communist, and this seems to be more focused on anarchist capitalist.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So where anarchist capitalist is primarily very the ideal golden age of piracy interpretation, where it's like you're all about raiding and pillaging, and you're in it for the gain, the physical well-being of yourself. Meanwhile, anarchistic communism is based around everyone has a say. It's very more democratic in its origin. So,
which feels contradictory to my head. You're already sort of like
it's contradictory.
So, without getting too into that concept, maybe focusing more. So you're seeing this as anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah.
The way that it's handled. Interesting. So Julien, how do you feel about Paradise Law?
Well, I think it's pretty much. Sorry, guys. It's pretty much how a lot of people see America. In a way, like this land where people have guns and will shoot you in the streets on a whim. It's of course it's a caricature. It's very exaggerated, but in Europe, that's a bit how we feel about the US and the US obsession with guns and owning guns and being able to shoot people if there's a need to shoot people and stuff like that.
Well, other than that last one, Matsumoto is obsessed with guns and owning guns as well, correct?
Yeah, and that's why it's not Hell's Law in a way. He's a bit ambivalent about these Western walls in a way where you can be a real man. That's something that comes again and again in his work. By living with your gun and fighting for your life and so on. So it's a caricature. It's not necessarily a criticism. But
I mean, it's almost. I get the feeling
of how America is perceived.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a future exaggeration too, right? What if instead of America being colonized on Earth, what does an American colony look like on Titan, on Heavy Melter? We'll later see. And it seems that, Matsumoto really romanticizes this idea to a great extent, perhaps in the same way he romanticized World War II, as we spoke on the other day, where it's not really a one-to-one. It's not meant to expose any great flaw in a system, but it's sort of the romanticized ideal of what is it to be American? And it seems Totoro loves those places, and Totoro is the Matsumoto surrogate. It's interesting. I don't know much about Matsumoto's politics outside of his criticism of politics. I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that, but it's a mystery. I guess we'll leave it as a mystery. Something to think about. What is Paradise Law? After this explanation, Grandma Oyama gives Tetsuro a boat, a hat, a cloak, and a gun. And all of these things being the gear of Totoro, who we will later meet. And we are seeing her almost give birth to Totoro again in some way, shape, or form. And this other sort of snapshot of a mother is also very important.
I always thought that Tetsuro was more of like a rebirth of both Toshiro and Harlock.
Yeah, definitely a mixture of the souls there in a way.
I mean, as much influence as they pass down through the culture. I mean, everyone kind of idealizes the Arcadia. They try and gain, a position there, or they try and get on as, one of the machine men.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just kind of boils down to, well, if you're going to become a human of one of these archetypes, you're going to become essentially a Harlock. You'll essentially just become one of the pirates. That's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that in the manga, the old lady on Titan is not Tochiro's mother.
Mm-hmm.
She's a woman who has a son who left and became a space adventurer, but is never identified. In the movie, they made her Tochiro's mom, so it feels like another of those Deus ex machina. I mean, of all people he could meet, he meets Tochiro's mother. But it works in this sort of fairy tale logic. And one thing that I love in this scene, that when you finally see the shelf with Tochiro's portrait on it, and you realize who is this son she's talking about. You can see some books on the sides. There's 2 books where you can actually read what's written on the back of the book.
On the spine, yeah.
On the spine. And one is a heavy metal collection. So heavy metal, Metal Hurlant in French, was a very famous science fiction comic book magazine from the mid-70s. And so that's a nice little nod to that here. And just next to that book, there's another related book. It's a comic book by Philippe Druyet, who is a French artist. And he did a comic book called Delirious. And that's what you can see on the spine of that other book. So he was also an artist drawing in Metal Hurlant and so on. So, yeah, it's like a little homage. I don't know if that came from Matsumoto or Rintaro or both. But that's a nice little homage to European science fiction comic books. Also, almost like a way of saying, like, we know we have lots of influences, and we're like tipping the hat to them in this scene.
Yeah, I mean, that's very common amongst all anime. If you go to watch SSX, the Harlock anime series, Tochiro's harmonica says Eric Clapton on it. In Macross, there's some posters that are just the Emerson, Lake and Palmer album cover all over the place. So, and they skirted a lot of copyright laws and just showing these things off as this is what influenced us: prog rock, European sci-fi, Eric Clapton, all these different influences. They do sort of wear them on their sleeves, and I like that they can do that because they're not so bound by maybe American copyright judges and lawyers. Tetsuro takes off. He goes on his boat, and a giant bug robot is carrying this little girl above him, and he arms himself with the Cosmo Dragoon for the first time and takes a shot and destroys the robot bug. He flies backwards. The kickback is very intense for Tetsuro at that point. In that conflict, he's approached by Antares, who catches the little girl out of midair, and Antares is this large, almost like an amplified version of Harlock to some degree in age, in build and appearance, and his vocal delivery.
Scarring.
Yeah,
Harlock when he reached grandpa stage.
Yeah, sure. And he definitely is somewhat of a grandpa that we'll find out here soon. Tetsuro fires, and it seems like he's firing at Antares, but behind him, it turns out there's a machine man that was about to take out Antares himself. And so everybody's very shocked, but Antares starts to question Tetsuro, and Tetsuro admits, I'm out here looking to get a machine body, and that's a big red flag for Antares because that's his sort of enemy, as we'll find out as we go along here. And so he's very shocked by this, and he's like, you know what? You're coming with me, kid. And they drag Tetsuro to his base. And this base is very interesting because it's you find out after they do scans of Tetsuro, who's reunited there at the base with Maytel, and they are all scanned. You see Maytel's body is human. But later we'll find there's something else going on there. And there's almost like this sexual implication when she's getting x-rayed, where Antares is like, oh, you're certainly a woman. It's a little...
It's actually in the manga and the animated series, Antares asks Maytel if she wants to become his wife and stays with him.
Okay.
So they don't put that in the movie, but that's actually something he tries.
Yeah. Tries. There are not many ladies on. I don't know how Grandma Oyama's made it that far on that planet, being so rough and tumble, but she must have
Cosmo Dragoon.
Yeah, I guess maybe she's a good shot, or maybe she's just well respected, and that may be the implication of Paradise Live. If you're a respectable person, you won't be taken out. And you also have to live in the middle of the woods.
But there's this story that when the Americans were invading Japan, so the Matsumoto's mother and grandmother were basically taking the katanas and getting ready to fight for their life and even kill themselves and the rest of the family if push came to shove. And Matsumoto says he later understood what was going on, because when he was a kid, he didn't really realize the implication of that. So I think in Grandma Oyama, as you call her, there's a feeling that she might look like a nice old lady, but she's still Tochiro's mom. She's probably pretty badass, and people who came looking for trouble found it.
Yeah, definitely.
The sort of like the idea that you don't get to be in a violent occupation and get to be old unless you're really good at that occupation.
Yeah, you handle yourself well. And in the scanning, Antares shows off that he is full of unexploded bullets. Tetsuro's like, aren't you worried that they're going to go off? And he says, well, I figure if that's a problem, I'll be too busy bleeding to worry. Foreshadowing. And so
what we feel about it, it's if you put that in the context of the message of the movie, here you have an adult who is a kind of a father figure for Tetsuro at this point and telling him, yeah, dying is not such a big deal.
Yeah.
At some point you have to die, and that's fine.
Right. Definitely coming from somebody who willingly puts themselves in danger constantly, this is a very important lesson for Tetsuro, who seems to have the same inclination. But what we find at this base are what I would say is Tetsuro's actual family. And that's because he is amongst now the orphans created by Count Mecha. And one could say that these are his brother and sisters, and Antares is his new father. And this is kind of a homecoming for Tetsuro in a lot of ways, whereas he never really had a home before. Random thought might have
that makes sense.
Quite true. And I think even the little girl, I don't notice if she's actually given a name, but she's reminiscent of Mayu, the Tochiro's daughter from the Captain Harlock TV series.
Sure.
So even she runs like Mayu does. It's this very specific kind of animation. So that's a way
kind
to
of
have
airplane
with Harlock.
Yeah, she does the airplane run, and she's got sort of that admiration of a big brother, but also maybe a little bit of a crush for an older classmate or something going on there. So, pardon me. Oh, and then it's time to drink. And Tetsuro gets a big glass of something or other. And yes, Chad, cheers. And he goes, and he has his sort of Bugs Bunny-esque, Looney Tunes-esque reaction to alcohol. And this could also be a reference to Matsumoto's experience, where he tells the story being on a train going to Tokyo as a 18-year-old, I believe, and being offered sake and as a sort of a drink of vigor and to the future. And he says he tossed it out the window, but watching this movie, maybe he took a swig. I don't know. Maybe he had a good time with it. It seems to be very lax. You know, if you're a kid and you're on a deadly mission, drink up, kid. Who cares? It's very interesting. Their lax take on childhood drinking. And Terry says, upon finding out that Tetsuro wants to kill Count Mecha, shoot first, ask questions later. And
go for the head.
Go for the head, right? And it's curious because we'll find out that Tetsuro doesn't seem to listen to anybody who ever gives him good advice.
Well, Antares also tells him, I think it's Antares who said that, like, Cosmogun is the only weapon capable of killing a machine.
Yeah.
And actually, the movie forgets about that very quickly.
Yeah, it is definitely. And how does the Cosmo gun work? Well, there'll be also some confusion there later. After this sort of excursion and meeting his family, he returns with Maytel to Grandma Oyama, and she tells Tetsuro to keep all of that gear. That's all his now. But that if he ever meets Tochiro, that he bring her up and say that, hey, your mom misses you. And we have this sort of inner dialogue by Grandma Oyama as he's leaving, and she says, I couldn't tell him not to go. Oh, she's thinking about Tochiro and the loss of him, and she says, I couldn't tell Tochiro not to go. Isn't that what it means to be a mother? And we have on display what I believe Matsumoto likely believes is the duty of a good mother to a good son is to let him go. That is the burden of all mothers to good sons, that they will need to go, and it is their duty to let them go and not hold them back. Next stop, Pluto, and it's cold. And we have Tetsuro shivering, and Maytel's next questionable activity, where she gives him, she opens up her coat to envelop him. And what is under that coat? In the TV show, we often see just a bra and panties underneath that coat. So there's a bit of flashing going on there. But that flashing turns into a flashback for his mother. And we have more of this reinforced Stockholm syndrome there. Maytel knows what she's doing in this instance. And as we'll learn, she's been on this ride before. So it's almost mechanical for her to go through these sort of actions.
And the content of Maytel's dress is or coat is a sort of a running gag. Because there are moments in the manga and in the animated series as well, I think, where like she's facing some villainous machine man and she just opens her coat and we don't see what they see, but they see something so horrible that their brain explode or they kill themselves. And so you don't know. But it's a very extensible coat, because he manages to envelop Tetsuro entirely in it. I mean, wow. I don't know what fabric it is, but it's pretty cool.
Well, it might be related to whatever the conductor does when he causes people to lose their mind.
Is this in the movie?
No, that's in the show. Okay. At one point, he's abducted. I forget on which planet. But he basically opens up his coat. And, of course, people know that he's just made of gas, right? But whatever is inside causes the woman that abducted him at gunpoint to just go into a fugue state, forget what happened. Just that was terrifying.
Yeah. Something about being enveloped in somebody else's clothes is very, can be a traumatic experience. The next stop, Pluto, and they land, and Maytel's got her thing to do as always, and they part, and she says, "Be careful," and he says, "Oh, don't worry, I got this," and she says, "But you forget, your gun won't work in this cold." So apparently, the Cosmo Dragoon doesn't work in the cold. I don't know if this is something that is running throughout any other series, but
well, actually, that's not what it says in the Japanese subtitles or the English subtitle on the Japanese track, where she tells him, "Sure, you have your Cosmo gun, but it won't keep you warm."
Okay.
Which makes more sense, I think.
Yeah, I guess they didn't think that joke would read for kids, but we're already doing so many other wild things. Like, why is that the edit you make there? Very, very weird. So thank you for that insight. They are separated, but then Tetsuro is like right on her tail instantly, this is kind of weird pacing for the movie. And then we get this like weird choppy zoom in, which may have been a commonly accepted anime technique, but again, I'm not sure why we aren't just using the multiplane camera to our advantage here and just smoothly zooming in. It's kind of weird. Maybe there were some budget constraints there that they couldn't do it properly, but I just find that a bit weird for the animation.
I think that's a very, very Rintaro style of editing. This sort of shutter effect,
right?
Like as if Tetsuro cannot believe his eyes, so he's like blinking or something. I think that's the sort of experimental stuff that Rintaro does a lot in his films.
Yeah, and it reads a little cheap today, but then it might not have. Tetsuro walks down and he notices all the bodies underneath of him. And we see Shadow, who looks a lot like Mime, which is weird because we do see Mime later in the film. It's curious why they went with this, but Mime is just very in the back and holding a martini when we see it later. And Shadow explains that these are the bodies of machine body adoptees who have left their bodies there, or they're sick. I guess being sick is a problem on Pluto. Very oddly mentions being sick specifically. She's just like, "Hey, you want to go check out my body?" And Tetsuro's not really into it, but he's like, come on, let's go. And Jack and this kid, and she explains, no other face could have compared to this body, and that's why I decided to just, screw having a face. I don't need one. She starts to envelop Tetsuro, extremely contradictory to what we just saw Maytel do, who is constantly said to be very warm, but Shadow is icy cold and nearly kills Tetsuro, it seems. He has sort of his own sort of weird eyeball expression going on there. And she is stopped by Maytel, who says, hey, Shadow, you made your choice. You got to live with that. And there's this very weird sort of sprinkling in of you made your bed, you have to live in it morality there. But this whole Pluto segment is a bit disjointed. What do you guys think?
I think it's disjointed as well, but at the same time, I think it kind of harkens back to the morality of becoming a machine. Mm-hmm. Just the basis of living with your regret. Mm-hmm. And in that respect, you can kind of see more of a humanity in Shadow, because Shadow has that kind of regret to live with, but only when reminded, seemingly. Meanwhile, Count Mecha, he's reminded with what he's done all the time, but he lavishes with it. So it's like he's relatively more inhumane by comparison.
Shadow has, and that's in her name. She's a shadow of herself. Mm-hmm. She's the embodiment of making a choice that you come to regret. And actually, what Metal scolds her for is that she's taking her frustration on Tetsuo, who was just there. And she's telling Shadow in the Japanese version, in the subtitles, Metal says it's your fault that you yet cannot decide if you want to be a machine or to be living in a living body. So it's not so much like you have to live with the choice you made. It's more like make a decision if you want to be one or the other, but you cannot.
And she lives in constant indecision.
And take it out on others. So and later in the movie, just after that, actually, we get introduced to Claire, who is another predicament because she was turned into a machine by her mother. So without her consent, we guess.
Or at least pressured into doing so. The pressuring mother,
complicated that we may think.
Yeah, another snapshot of the mother, the unideal mother who puts their will onto their child, and their child has to live to regret it and work their way out of that hole. Yeah, with Shadow, and we also see with Shadow kind of the inconsiderate host. This it's like when you go to a bar and you start talking to a regular and they start going on about their life and their sob story or something like that. Nobody wants to, and they smother you with their own sadness. It's like, I'm not here for that, lady. But just kind of a random spitball thought there. So
the whole scene also reminded me a bit of the Snow Queen fairy tale, not the Disney version, but with Shadow as a Snow Queen who tries to get this kid, so Kai in the fairy tale, to stay with her forever in this land of snow. So I think that's another, scene that reminds you that we are in fairy tale mode, physically.
Sure. Yeah, sort of an adaptation, the sci-fantasy fairy tale, which I think it's better than Star Wars. That's me. I'll just interject that opinion right there. Moving on. So, yeah, Maytel kind of, they get back on the train, and Maytel explains that people can have their old bodies back, and what is the implication of that? I believe she says, is it a kindness or an unspeakable cruelty to those who have decided to move on with the machine body and to live in that sort of implying the pain of indecision. Tetsuro then is met with his own moral decision. Maytel is sitting across from him on the train, and he has the compact, which contains the Dream Reader. And he takes the acid, the light-based acid tablet, and he's about to put it on her forehead, and he backs off, and he says, what difference would it make? To know what would change? I'm still going to go on this journey. I still want to do what I want to do. Is this honorable or stupid?
I'd say both.
Yeah.
I mean, it is honorable because, that's to a degree betraying someone's trust because you're delving into their mind. And, that's not always the best place to be. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes your thoughts betray your intentions, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be not necessarily what you are and who you've turned into. So there's that. Meanwhile, he's on a mission and he's just kind of throwing that out the window. I don't care who she is. She's here and I have to deal with that. That's a stupid move.
Yeah, you get the sense that Metal gave him the device.
Right.
In the earlier scene at the end. I use that to scan your mind, so I take it. So in a way, you get the feeling that this was a sort of test as well.
Yeah, she smirks.
What he will do with that.
Right, she smirks. And it's sort of a Willy Wonka almost sort of level of test. But I like Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka is a little less detestable than Maytel at times. So, but like you said, yes, it's dinner time on the Galaxy Express 39, and we do meet Claire, who is basically a naked crystal statue of a woman. Maytel orders for both of them. It's a very motherly thing to do. I'll have steak with bread or something, and he'll have steak with rice. Tetsuro beholds Claire and is obviously, a young boy seeing this basically naked statue, very smitten with it. And Maytel's like, "You want some of that, don't you?" And she's like, "It's okay. Yeah, it's fine." And she's like very, loosey-goosey swingery almost with it, because there's also the romantic implication between those two. But like you said, Julien, Claire is deemed a living ornament at the behest of her mother. And this is the kind of snapshot of the controlling mother that determines your fate for you and doesn't allow you to act.
I think there's two interesting things in that scene. Is that you only briefly see the menu of the train, but the little you see seems to be written in English, and I think that Tetsuro it's an admission basically that Tetsuro cannot read English because of how he was raised, and probably he didn't have English lessons and anything. So, but he won't admit it.
He may be illiterate. Period. Is kind of
possibly, and so. You also, if you take indeed that English is American is mechanized, so you can have this sort of maybe foreshadowing. Maybe I'm just spitballing.
That's interesting. Yeah, Maytel is much more abreast of the mechanization, the sort of influence.
And Claire is an interesting character because she has a bigger role in the movie compared to the manga and the animated series, when she's basically a one-shot character. And actually, Matsumoto later came to regret using her so little. And when he rebooted or decided to continue Galaxy Express, 15 years after it ended in 1996, one of the first things he did was basically resurrect Claire and make her a regular character in the story.
And we see that in Eternal Fantasy as well, where she comes back. But that's for another episode.
Yeah, but Claire is really for Tetsuro. It's probably the first time he meets a machine person. So she looks very peculiar compared to the others, but she's also a kind person, very sweet, very humane, and that's new as well for him, because in this moment. You realize that, machine men don't have to be evil. They can be actually nice people too. And I think it's important for the story that he has also this experience of that machine persons are not inherently bad.
And she expresses that, perhaps metaphorically, as being a literal light in the dark, as the train enters the quote-unquote tunnel, which I'm still a little shaky on. But yeah, she is that light in the dark that he sees perhaps within these mechanized people. But that's sort of conflicting in some ways as well. But we'll see more of her later on. But what we didn't touch on when Tetsuro's at the base with Antares is he's asking how to find Queen Emeraldis. I believe he asked in that instance. He basically says if she wants to find you, you'll see her, and that's when it'll happen. And so they come out of the tunnel, and then they lose light again. They say, what's going on? And the Queen Emeraldus, the giant blimp shape ship, pulls up next to the 3-9 and says, and claims the right of way. And in the three-dimensional transport of space, this is the ultimate power move. There is no reason for her to need this. And it's almost as if she's sort of drawn to this sort of situation, almost maybe setting it up. Maybe there's a communication between Maytel and Emerald. We don't know. But they pull up. Tetsuro notices the skull, maybe perhaps from wanted posters that he'd seen before, and opens the window and cracks a shot with the Cosmo Dragoon at the Queen Emeraldus. And this is a holy shit type moment for everybody else. Tetsuro opens fire, and Emeraldus fires her own warning shot, and this kind of brings everything to a halt, and she boards, and they have their confrontation where Emeraldus definitely disarms him of the Cosmo Dragoon. But the Cosmo Dragoon in and of itself inspires Emeraldus to say, who are you? How did you get this gun? And we find the connection between Emeraldus and Totoro and Tetsuro and even Maytel, who we later in the Leijiverse, we find that they are sisters. But in this movie, maybe not. Any insight on that? On the relationship between Queen Emeraldus and Maytel?
I think, first, an important distinction, Queen Emeraldus is a ship.
True, yes.
But yeah, at this point, Matsumoto had not yet decided that Emeraldus and Maytel were sisters, and both of them were daughters of Prometium and so on. It's what's pretty great is that if you watch the scenes between them, knowing that they are supposed to be, or will later be supposed to be sisters, it works very well, because they have this sort of glances, and you can feel that there's some history between them, and
unspoken communication.
And so you say, if you watch this and say, and by the way, they're sisters, you're like, right,
okay,
it makes sense. Not like, what are you talking about? It's crazy. It's at this moment that actually Matsumoto decided that they were going to be sisters, possibly.
Yeah, those wires crossed.
Just after that, he did Queen Millennia. And in Queen Millennia, you have the blonde Millennia, so Yayoi Yukino. And she has a sister with a red hair, Selene. And because in Matsumoto, cycles repeat again and again and again. You have this first hint here that maybe Maytel also has a sister with a red hair. And who could that be?
Yeah. And we have Prometheum as Millennia, as Rafflesia, as, all these sort of archetypal queen type characters that show up time and time again. Yes. Tetsuro asks Emeraldus, where is the time castle, Count Mecha's hideout? And of course, she's shocked, end up saying, don't throw your life away so quickly, kid. Maybe grow up a little bit first. But of course, there's no time for Tetsuro to grow up. He's got to go fast. Somewhat of a Sonic type character. But next stop is Trader's Fork. And Claire behind the scenes with the conductor begging to just skip Trader's Fork this time. Let's not stop there this time. But of course, that's not going to work for the conductor, who slyly eats his ice cream cone, sort of devours it in one bite, and goes, you got a crush on him or something. And it's interesting that the conductor and Maytel are both very aware of the attraction between Claire and Tetsuro, and very sort of laissez-faire. And there's that old sort of maybe it's a French trope, I'm not sure, but of the conductor and the waitress, or maybe like the male and the female servant sort of gallivanting behind the scenes, having their own sort of relationship. So maybe there's sort of that Tetsuro Maytel dynamic with Claire and the conductor. It's something to consider.
But it's the first time we see the conductor in an interaction with someone else than the passengers is watching after. And that's interesting because we see him a bit more natural and being a bit teasing and being a bit of a jerk toward Claire in that scene. So it gives another view at him. Like, he's not like always a very like, whoa. He can be also a normal person.
Well, he's always sort of coming apart at the seams, right? When you first see him, his armband sort of drips down. So he's always like kind of trying to maintain this tight appearance, but he's sort of just a neurotic, frantic mess in all actuality, just desperately trying to hold it together. But they approach Heavy Melder, which is where Trader's Fork is, and this is another Paradise Law type planet, and this is Tochiro's regular resting place in the proper Harlock sort of Leijiverse. Tetsuro enters a bar alone, and we hear the very beautiful song, try not to murder this, Yasashiku Shinaidi. Shinaidi? I'm not sure. How do you say? Shinaidi.
Yasashiku Shinaide.
And it's a sad hit, and everybody loves it. Everybody goes from tears to extreme applause, and we have our Leiji Matsumoto cameo in this scene. Looking real good. He's got quite the fiery redhead on his arm there. Tetsuro.
He's always somewhere.
Yeah, he's always showing up. Matsumoto.
You can find Leiji.
Sure.
Usually drinking.
Of course. Or being trampled in My Youth in Arcadia. So Tetsuro is clapping, and he's next to the bartender, and the bartender notices him and says, "What'll you have, kid?" And he orders a glass of milk, and the whole bar laughs, and there's sort of the naivete. This is another very common thing in the Leijiverse for a kid to enter a bar and order some milk and get laughed at and subsequently maybe trampled. We'll see that a little bit later. The bartender asks him about what he wants, and Tetsuro says, "I'm trying to find Count Mecha in the time castle." And he's just saying this out loud, and the whole bar just shuts up. And there's obviously a sort of ominous nature of Count Mecha. Everybody knows what's going on here, and we'll soon find out the lady playing the song is the mistress of Count Mecha. She's very aware of what's going to happen here. And the bartender's like, "What the hell?" and pulls him into the back room, and he says, "What are you doing? You trying to get yourself killed?" It's almost like the Christmas story. "You'll shoot your eye out, kid. What are you doing?" He says, "You know what? There's an eccentric that lives at the bottom of Mount Gun Frontier," which is a reference to Gun Frontier, the first proper appearance of Harlock and Tochiro, as many people recognize it. Somewhere out of nowhere, like we said, motorized bike shows up, and he's taking this moped all the way and basically totally wrecks it at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah, just wanted to add a little something before we move to the big climatic confrontations. Is that one thing that Heavy Melder that sets Heavy Melder apart from the planets we've seen so far is the aliens. You arrive in Heavy Melder and you have this street and you have all kinds of weird people with very not humans and machines, but really alien species living there. And everybody seems to bar fights aside, everybody seems to more or less live together peacefully, and that's why it makes, I think, this planet special in the Leijiverse, is that it's one of those planets where you get the feeling that here it has this evil force that is the time castle and Count Mika and his goons, but apart from that, you get the feeling that this could be a planet that would be okay to live on because people get along.
And it's another American idea, right? I mean, the first country on Earth to openly be about the intersection of all races or walks of life, in theory, right? And obviously, the exercise of that is much different, and that's why we have a fascist force on Heavy Melder, Count Mecha himself. Tetsuro crashes his bike right at the doorstep, or basically the hull of the Death Shadow, as we see that looms above, which Tochiro has made his what will be soon his final resting place. Tetsuro, right off the bat, holds up his promise to Grandma Oyama and says, "Your mother misses you." Tochiro just totally shrugs it off. I said my goodbyes a long time ago. Come on in. That's the past. Let's talk about what's happening right now.
He does ask how she is.
Oh, okay.
He does ask, like, you saw my mother, how was she? And then he said, yeah, but I'm not turning back now.
She misses you. Yeah, I believe is the answer there. She misses you. But yeah, he kind of shrugs it off and he's like, let's talk about what's happening now. And like I said, Tetsuro has a past that he's running from and a future he's running to, and there's no time for the present. But Tochiro kind of takes this moment to reinforce what's happening right now. And that's critical when you're about to go fight one of the biggest battle of your life up to this point. It's important to take stock of the situation. And Tochiro notices that I see the hand of fate in all of this. You've come to do what I wanted to do until this damn sickness came. And, he kind of crashes a bit there. And he's taking on the final moments of his life with extreme casualty. He's well, that's not exactly the right word. That's the misuse of that word. But he does it very casually. Tochiro basically saying, "Hey, I'm sick. Here's when the time castle's gonna show up tonight. Actually, very convenient. More Deus Ex Machina, and on top of that Deus Ex Machina, I need you to help me pull that lever over there." Which, how is he gonna do it without somebody to pull that lever? I guess maybe he's waiting for that moment. But what's really interesting here is
I think he trains a bird.
Yeah,
right.
Theory. That.
Right. Maybe Tori's not reliable. Maybe Tori-san's not reliable in this instance.
Showing up at
very emotional. Yeah, I mean, Tetsuro's not really gotten the time to absorb this emotional thing, and Tori is just an extremely emotional character, one of the most emotional characters in all of the Leijiverse. He cries constantly especially when he gets a drink in him. He pulls this, and what's more interesting here to talk about, I think, is why is it okay for Tochiro to be a machine? And it's not okay for everybody else to be a machine. Is it because Tochiro's life was machines? Is it because he has a better understanding of the technology? Is it because it's his usage is moral and good and everybody else's is vain and self-serving? And why isn't Tetsuro's desire for a machine body not moral? Any thoughts on this?
I think my take on this is that, and I actually wrote an article on 999 on this topic a couple of years ago, is that Tochiro's is because of the sickness, the nature of which is pretty vague and changes from one story to the next. Mm-hmm. But because of his illness, his life is being cut short, and he wishes to become part of the ARCADIA, not because he wants to live forever or because he desires power, but because he wants to be there to help his friends more, to continue to be able to be with them. So there's an altruistic need for Tochiro to become this artificial intelligence or whatever he becomes. Yeah. Whereas the machine men we've seen so far, with Claire being this exception, became immortals because they could, because that was cool to live forever and have no emotions anymore and no. So that's the difference here.
Well, not necessarily no emotions, but the concept of not being able to die is what makes life. And this is something I've said about the Leijiverse many times, is that in the Leijiverse, freedom, you can only be free if you will die. Is that there is no freedom without the concept of death. You have to have an expiration date for freedom to mean anything, or otherwise it's lost its meaning.
And it's a bit like the trolls on the internet, the people who are very, very mean and aggressive, and because they know there will be no consequences to their actions. And it's a bit like this. You become a machine. You basically, you cannot die. So you don't have to care. So you can be a jerk to everyone.
Lose your
in the
empathy.
universe. So
Yeah.
there's the trolls of the Matsumoto-verse.
Interesting. Yeah, and Tetsuro's desire to become a machine body is, I suppose it's just misinformed that he doesn't need to achieve this status to execute his vengeance, as we'll find out. He was capable of doing it even outside of a machine body, which is something he just perhaps never put together because of the indoctrination of his mother. Tetsuro's mother is not the ideal mother. She has implanted a false idea in his head that he's lived his life under a false pretense. And he's shrugging that off through all these experiences. Totoro, it does seem that his soul is getting sucked out of his body. He perishes, and also shoot for the head is uttered by Totoro. Maybe not Antares, but Totoro. You almost get an idea. Is this a reference to zombies? Go for the head? Why is it there in the head? Is this? I don't know if Matsumoto ever was, close to a zombie film, or if those ever really, if Night of the Living Dead was aired in Japan or what. Just a random thought there, but there is sort of an implication that these people are zombies to an extent. They're ever living. They're no longer organic, and Count Mecha specifically seems to feast on the living, on the flesh.
That's something you see right after that when the time castle appears, and it's a very, very gothic thing with demon statues, and you could be in an Hammer horror film with Count Mecha, and so it's actually part, I think, of this same symbolism of to kill the undead.
Oh yeah, maybe like a vampire almost too.
That's Dracula in the book. The stake in the art is only to immobilize him, but to kill him, you need to cut his head off.
Ah, okay. So that makes sense. Maybe not so much a zombie, but vampires, which is undead. Are you big undead buff? Are you big, undead myth movie buff, Chad? Do you like those types of flicks?
Yeah, I'm pretty into horror movies in general, and decent amount of horror novels, so...
Do you see any parallels here in the upcoming scene, or what we've discussed? Any exceptional insight on that?
I mean, the upcoming scene definitely having to do with a castle appearing. That's basically Castlevania. You show up in the middle of wherever. There's this renowned castle with missing technology. And, you essentially have to have a special ability, power, or some kind of intrigue against the Count. I mean, literally, it's a Count.
Yeah.
And, they're usually broadsided by their own arrogance, and someone from within is going to be what causes them to be taken over.
Yeah.
That's how it always works. It's a formula for taking out Dracula.
Okay. So yeah, the Dracula thing, we've solidified that there. But Totoro's death is felt everywhere. On Queen Emeraldus' ship, the lights start flashing. We see Totoro's soul basically enter the main computer of the Arcadia, and Harlock's gleaming eye seeing that. And we also have Totoro's photograph, the portrait that Julien mentioned earlier, falling off. And there's a cute little Easter egg, if you pay attention, the face of Totoro sort of comically expressing itself as it falls off of the mantle there. And Tetsuro utters this line: being born means that you have to die, whether you've done what you've wanted to or not. And this is some cold stuff. Tetsuro may have just buried a man on his own. So this is some brutal, introduction to what does it mean to die. And to bury a man at age of 15 is pretty intense. Tetsuro is jetting off from there, and he gets jacked by some bandits who take his gun from him. And they're back at the bar, and he shows up at the bar, and he says, "Give it back!" And he's bleeding from his face, and the bandits are basically laughing, and cue Captain Harlock, who wanders on to the grave of Tochiro after experiencing his soul entering the Arcadia. He's hot on the trail of Tetsuro, and he meets up with Tori, and maybe even Tori tells him where he's gone. And Harlock enters Deus Ex Machina into the bar as Tetsuro is being beaten up. He grabs a bottle of milk and pours it after basically disarming or dishanding the robot, pours the milk down the throat of these machine body bandits.
After telling you that only a Cosmogun can destroy a machine man, you see Harlock coming and breaking a machine arm with his bare hand.
Yeah.
He's badass like that.
And also the symbolism of the pouring of this simple, organic, benign, alkaline chemical composition here, and something that does not well, we didn't believe it did too much harm to humans. Milk might not be so good for you, as we've come to learn, but this thing that's perceived as good for the human body totally destroys a machine man's body. That stuff will rust me from the inside. And we have that symbolism there of Harlock sort of taking innocence and injecting it back into the machine man, and they reject it. They go through that, and they all reconvene. Harlock, Tetsuro, Maytel, Emeraldus in the middle of the street of Heavy Melter, and Tetsuro's about to tell Emeraldus what happened to Tochiro, but Harlock doesn't want the wrath of Emeraldus to go on to Tetsuro for this. He'll take it for his best friend and tell Emeraldus what has happened, and she basically turns around and runs off. She can't handle that grief. Tetsuro is now on his initial mission here, and he sneaks up on the time castle, and what we see is like this cloaked forklift driver, this like druidic forklift driver driving by, and he sneaks in through a levitating platform, and he enters the dining room of the time castle, and he spots his mother mounted on the wall, and this is ultimate trauma right now for him. The rage has got to be pumping in his body. He knows that he knew this was her fate, but to see it so clearly displayed is really disturbing for him. Count Mecha then sneaks up on a disarmed Tetsuro with his whole clique. The whole crew is with him. His mistress that was playing at the bar and a few other cloaked figures. Mecha disarms Tetsuro with a good shot from his rifle, and it seems one of his henchmen is closing in on Tetsuro to finish the job. Mecha seems to be fine with this, but we find that Antares has infiltrated the time castle as well. This is maybe more of the one of the most unbelievable things to happen in the movie. I can excuse most other things, but Antares has done this through sheer will. Maybe he snuck on the Galaxy Express and he's been a stowaway the whole time. Who knows?
Or maybe Harlock called him.
Possible
You're
as well.
looking for this final battle, right?
Yeah.
Tetsuro needs you, and the time castle is there.
Yeah.
Are you saying Antares just is looking for a place to die?
Yeah.
It's possible. He sees in Tetsuro this will to do something that he thinks is just insane. And perhaps he's reached his own sort of decision that, man, if this little kid thinks he can do it and make this much progress, what has been my excuse? I'm here defending these kids from Mecha, but why haven't I just taken the job into my own hands? And there may be something to that.
And in the dialogue, there's something also about Count Mecha that shows how irredeemable he is. Because Tetsuro tells him, I've come to avenge my mother. And Count Mecha is there like, yeah, kid, for me it was Tuesday, He's basically, one more, one less. Why do I care? So you really feel like, yeah, this guy is really a piece of crap.
Antares shows himself. Antares provides an opportunity for Tetsuro to disengage from the crew and chase after a fleeing Count Mecha and his mistress. Tetsuro comes up to Count Mecha and takes a trusty shot with his Cosmo Dragoon and literally disarms Count Mecha, who turns around and starts pleading for his life. And we have another instance of Tetsuro not seeming to be able to absorb a damn lesson here. Everything that Antares tells him seems to just go right over his head, and it ends up being Antares who has to take the shot from Count Mecha for him. It seems like it's right in his heart. and he takes that shot and then throws himself basically on the situation. Did you forget about the live bullets inside of me? And goes up and basically explodes himself, a sort of suicide bombing, to put it hard to put it any other way, but a very, very righteous one in this instance. And Terry's in this last moment saying, you know, don't trust Maytel, which is another thing that Tetsuro will promptly ignore. Poor Antares constantly being ignored by this seemingly idiot at times. But Mecha, you know, telling the mistress to move the time castle before this, but she refuses, and basically is another person here sacrificing themselves so that Tetsuro can achieve their goals, and later explains why she felt the need to betray and stand up against the will of Count Mecha. But Tetsuro finally comes to, domes Count Mecha, who at his last dying breath pulls the self-destruct lever. The mistress has a bit of time to humanize Count Mecha and try to sort of absolve him of some of his sins, by, or at least humanize him again, which is...
And again, if you put it in the context of mechanized people as stand-in for American occupation, use the singer, or the mistress, she's basically the Japanese woman who went through plastic surgery to please her American lover.
Back alley at that.
So she's a tragic person as well.
Yeah, definitely. That does open my eyes again, because I always had that perception with my youth in Arcadia, but bringing it to this, you definitely see all the parallels there.
And I think Mika really loved her.
Yeah,
in his way at some point.
Right.
Just you should not. The lesson here is you should not change yourself for someone else's benefit. That's a mistake she made.
Nothing good can come of that. The time castle begins to rust, and Tetsuro Deus Ex Machinas his way out of that situation as well. Everything rusting around him. And I gotta say, that kid's got permanent lung damage after that. That's kind of a tough breathing environment.
Excessive chromium, you know.
It's tough.
Like Chad was doing earlier, when I was rewatching this morning, I also felt like this is basically Castlevania. When you get the end of the game, you kill Dracula, and then you get a shot of the hero watching from a cliff, the castle dissolving. And I wonder if, because this movie was such a big hit in Japan and so influential, I guess the people who made Castlevania, less than a decade after this movie came out in 86, the first Castlevania game. I wonder if that's actually the inspiration for this sort of final scene of the castle dissolving. I don't know.
Does that happen in the books, Chad?
No.
Or no, it doesn't.
No.
Castlevania, the video game.
No, I'm saying in like any Dracula book the castle disappears after.
The castle doesn't disappear, but essentially his power just dissipates. His ability to influence people. But even with the addition of Dr. Stoker's book, Dracula the Undead, there's still a continuation of the power. I'm not going to get into that. It's weird.
Sure. So yeah, that may be a unique concept that influenced the Castlevania makers. That's interesting, Joe. The castle goes away, and on top of the rust pile is the guitar of the mistress, which she's playing up until her final moments. And you see Tetsuro try to strum it. A string breaks, perhaps a reference there to sort of these binds becoming undone and the destruction of the metal itself. And you definitely get Kakaider vibes from this scene. If you've seen, I watched a lot of the reboot when it was on Toonami, but you have Kakaider, the android man, the Pinocchio sort of man, with the guitar and a sad song. And I definitely get big Kakaider vibes from that. I'm not sure if there's a Rintaro connection to Kakaider or what. Well, I know that, isn't that Ishinomori who did Kakaider?
I think so, yeah.
I think it was Ishinomori, and Ishinomori, Tezuka, and Matsumoto were all, they called themselves the three animation maniacs of Japan. So you may be seeing a bit of Matsumoto. I don't know if that scene happens in the manga where he stands with the guitar, Do you know, Julian?
No, because basically Ryu's in the manga or in the animated series is a character Tetsuro meets in one of the stops of the Galaxy Express. And so she's this woman who changed her body to please her lover, and then he basically abandoned her. And she's
because
character, blah blah blah. But she's not connected to Count Mika, and Count Mika,
because he gets domed right off the bat. Yeah, he gets murdered pretty quick in a very a scene seems inspired from Say Hello to My Little Friend, sort of deal like that. A Scarface, almost a bit of a Scarface scene in the original animation and manga.
I know that when I reach this point in the movie, I usually feel like, okay, the story has reached its end. I mean, in a way, Tetsuro has avenged his mother. He felt that revenge maybe is a bit empty in the end. And you feel like if it was an American movie, it would end there.
Right.
But no, there's another act coming right after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and but you do see that Tetsuro finally accepts that being a machine man is not a good idea. And even after being told, don't trust Maytel, Tetsuro goes to Maytel and basically gushes with gratitude. Thank you so much for bringing me on this adventure. I never would have gotten to know all this stuff and this thing and that thing. Thank you so much, Maytel. And Maytel basically stone-faced in her own regret and sadness for what she's about to do. Is she living with that regret? I would say probably not. Throughout a good deal of this movie, she shows a lot of regret and a lot of indecision because of that regret. She comes to have an ultimate indecision later on, as we'll see. They get back on the 3-9. More childhood drinking. Maytel pours a glass of wine. Similar reaction by Tetsuro. He seems to enjoy it. Tetsuro noticing that Maytel, why are you all sad, Maytel? And in that moment, he sort of remembers Anteria's warning. Finally, in that, Maytel basically gives him a hair flip and says, "Oh, it's not a big deal." And it's a very beautiful woman power move to sort of just flip your hair, look beautiful, and say, "Nothing's wrong, baby. Don't worry about it." And
that's when you see Tetsuro is very young and naive, because such an out of character reaction with a more mature man hopefully would say, okay, something is very wrong.
yeah, definitely. Tetsuro in this moment says, "I want to be with you, Maytel. I'd love to spend some more time with you after this whole adventure is over." And the Stockholm Syndrome is on. It's at 100 right now. Before it was maybe cranking up slowly. We started at like a 60 when they get on the train. We're at 100 now. Maytel's got nothing to say to it, basically. Weird cut later. Maytel's talking to her father once again. And her father's like, "Don't catch feels, honey. We got a mission here. Do not lose sight of the mission. Even you're too young to be losing hope this quickly," which is quite the statement, because if we consider Maytel infinite life, it seems. So next stop, Planet Maytel, the end of the line. And right off the train, these Machine Man officials confront Tetsuro, and they basically explain, "Hey, you'd be a great asset to the mechanization of Planet Maytel. You've got very strong will." And we come to realize in this moment, Tetsuro finally comes to realize he's been set up. And we have
a very strong moment when they broadcast the name of the planet, and it's Planet Maytel.
Yeah, and he's asleep.
Like everything, he's asleep when the conductor says it. But then when he steps out of the train, there's a voice saying like, "Terminus, Planet Maytel, Planet Maytel." And he's like, "What?"
Yeah, and we finally have our moment of greatest catharsis here with "You bitch!" And he slaps the shit out of Maytel. And it's something that we all kind of want to see happen here. I mean, am I the only person who's like, finally, at this point?
Like, to a degree, I can definitely see that. But unfortunately, I came into this already knowing the ending. So it's like, on one hand, it's Maytel getting together, an entire league of people that have slowly been turned over into literal parts
Mm-hmm.
that want to fail strategically. And then, from his view, definitely she's being a horrible, awful person. This is unwarranted and a huge violation. It's also a plan. It's a ploy.
He gets his comeuppance for it anyways. He's instantly knocked out and taken away. And Maytel is like, and runs off and hops in some hover vehicle and jets away. We get our hints of what I'd say is the best song in the whole movie, Planet Maytel. This is the tops of the entire soundtrack. The jazz guitar, the swells, and the stings all just give you the most epic part of the movie is upon us. Anybody else like the song Planet Maytel?
It's very dreamy. You have this sort of where are we now in this?
Yeah, the harp is very dreamlike, right?
And then later, of course, you have a return to that melody, but in a much more like epic in a way.
Well, it's the same song, just the beginning of the song and then the end of the song is and it very well scored.
And when it returns, the dreamy part really feels like something is dissolving into the universe, which is what's happening technically. So that's very smart. Aoki is I hope he's still alive. I'm not sure, but he is one hell of a composer. He did some amazing stuff.
Absolutely. And so Queen Prometheum finally appears to us, and they've got the whole galaxy in their cape, which is a very interesting touch. Does anybody know where that comes from? Is this a reference to something, having the universe in your cape? Because I see this is very common in anime. I think I've seen this in other animes later, but did they kind of revolutionize this idea of the galaxy cape?
I think so.
Yeah. Because I don't remember seeing it before. I can't be completely sure because I haven't seen everything.
Yeah, there could be a manga where it's in there, or something else.
But it certainly establishes Prometheum as this cosmic threat. She's a universe all in herself. She's basically, Tetsuro needs to defeat her to prevent this version of the universe to take over the other one. Again, a theme that you see in many of Matsumoto's work later with the metanoids who are trying to do that.
The metanoids, in a later Galaxy Express story, the novels, I believe you were saying.
Yeah, the second manga, the novels, the Ring of the Nibelungen, basically everything Matsumoto has done since the 90s as a metanoids, as a uber threat, tying everything together.
The meta, And she's basically, being told, Tetsuro's got a strong will, so he'll make a good bolt. I don't want to be a bolt. I don't want to be a bolt. This is, nobody wants to be. And that's basically, taking this whole idea of mechanization to you're just being turned into a tool. You're being, and maybe this is a commentary on Western capitalist society where you are just a bolt. You're just a cog in a machine. When you take place in this industrialization, bringing it back to what we were talking about before, you're just becoming part of the machine.
And ironically enough, Tetsuro from the very beginning wanted to use the machines as a tool to go kill Mecha.
And that's all you'll be if you're a machine. You're just a tool. And maybe Totaro's affinity for tools makes him excited to be in that position. He's and he loses humanity in that he's not a automaton. He's a ship. He can act independently. We'll see that in the manga. But yeah, it's definitely different. Tetsuro's laid out on a table, ready to be mechanized in maybe a similar fashion to Totoro. But with his hands bound. It's very interesting. The imagery is Totaro's becoming a machine, is his hands are up and he's reaching up towards the light. But Tetsuro would have been doing it with his hands bound and like sort of that Christ-like, crucifixion pose, being sacrificed against his will. Maytel comes up on this situation and confesses that she is the daughter of Prometheum, and that the voice in the locket that he had heard once before was Dr. Bond, who we never really see Dr. Bond. We don't get to know much about his story other than he's like, I was material. I forget how he explains how he was transformed, but he's basically mechanized into a locket. He's a tool in his own way, shape, or form.
It's basically Toshiro. It's the same kind of situation. To continue fighting, he's become a digital consciousness, not in a ship, but in a necklace. But again, you get the feeling that there also that came from an altruistic desire to help the universe.
Yeah. And he led a rebellion and lost against Queen Prometheum. So Maytel and Bond have been apparently putting young boys into Planet Maytel. These young boys have all apparently volunteered. Unlike Tetsuro, who is ignorant of the whole time as being unique as the final piece, all these other boys have joined and become mechanized and put into strategic places within Planet Maytel, specifically for the purpose of sabotaging the entire planet and Prometheum's goals. They just go over this so fast. I mean, if you watch this the first time and you haven't heard this podcast, you might miss everything that's said in that 2 seconds of dialogue, which explain the entire movie and the plot.
But Dr. Ban is probably, and I think Matsumoto confirmed that in an interview somewhere, is a version of Mirai Zoban, basically. This character that's at the core of the Ring of Time, reincarnation, cosmology Matsumoto built. So that gives another reading to when Maytel says that she's a woman who travels through time and space. So if she inherited the sort of powers that Mirai Zoban had, that could be something a different meaning. But I don't know if Matsumoto actually went that far in his reflection. But but yeah, again, it's a way to show that all these characters are part of a shared epic that transcends time and space, basically.
We find out that the locket has to be cast into the depths of Planet Maytel somehow to activate this sabotaging of the entire planet. Harlock shows up and makes his speech. There comes a time when, you must put yourself in danger no matter the cost. And he expresses his will to the Arcadia crew. Not a scratch on Tetsuro. He's kind of using a gun to do fine surgery to protect this boy, but he somehow pulls it off.
You get the feeling, the way the scenes are put together, you really get the feeling that Harlock is almost summoned like a guardian spirit in a way, because you have Tetsuro saying, I'm going to do this, I don't care if I die, and cut to the Arcadia appearing in space and saying, yes, sometimes this needs to happen, and I am here. So Harlock at this point has become almost a supernatural god. If you take into account the Ring of the Nibelungen connection, it's a bit like a summoning the champion, the celestial champion to support you in your moment of need. And in this case, it's a badass space pirate with a badass ship and a badass crew. And what could be better than that?
Well, and me may sip at a cocktail in the back.
two badass pirates, actually.
Chad, any thoughts on Harlock's appearance here?
It's pretty much like the quintessential Harlock. It's, reprisal. It's coming back with vengeance on a fascist and, for lack of a better term, like enslavery. Not enslavering, that's not even a word.
Enslavement, I think?
Yeah. Because that's what happens with, the mechanization process. You're basically just enslaving someone's spirit.
Yeah, with a system that seems like it gives you eternal life. And, if we could break it down to capitalism, we could get real political there and say, what are the promises of capitalism and what are the costs of capitalism and the implications there. Chad, did I hear you say at one point that you suspect that Harlock is wasted at this point?
Yeah. I have this idea that most of the time, whenever Harlock is at the helm, he is drinking heavily, and I don't think that's even projection. Um,
He's got a little bit of a lean to his walk in there when you see him kind of, and this is a classic Harlock animated sequence where he approaches the camera and hits it dead on, and then you see him from the back as he walks away, and he's walking with quite the swagger in this scene.
He leans very far to the right in every step. It's like, ooh.
And he's got quite the smirk on his face as he pilots, and he pilots from outside of the Arcadia in the scene, which is another sort of climactic Harlock experience there.
Which he doesn't do like anywhere else, does he?
SSX, the end of SSX, he does it.
Finally, we get to see why there's a wheel
on the galleon
on the top of the.
Yeah.
It's not just for decoration.
No. Emeraldus shows up too. Emeraldus provides cover for the 3-9 eventually. Tetsuro is basically, as we cut between all these action sequences, we see Tetsuro basically popping off random members of Prometheum's crew with the Cosmo Dragoon. And Prometheum is throwing on the motherly mind games. And another snapshot here of the manipulative mother, the mother that uses the child not just as a surrogate for their own life, but to achieve their own dreams and ideas. And she's manipulating Maytel into believing that. And but apparently, and saying Planet Maytel is you, which I guess is a problem. I don't really understand how, Maytel at one point is torn like, this planet is me too. How is that? I don't know. Does anybody have any light to shed on that? Or are we just going to shrug it off as maybe this is a Rintaro thing? I don't know.
I think that's unique to the movie for sure.
Yeah.
I think to a degree, it's like this is how she would be continuing her eternal life.
Yeah.
Because it's always about turning, someone into the next Maytel. I mean, pretty sure if this is the one planet they have to go to do it, then maybe if it's destroyed, it's like, pushing a stake into her heart.
Yeah, I mean, she's been indoctrinated by her mother as well, it seems, to the nth degree. This is the ultimate bad mom we're looking at right now in Prometheum. And Harlock is distracting the mechanized army from kind of taking care of Tetsuro in this situation. Maytel is struggling, and Tetsuro is basically like, sees Prometheum's about to try and jack the pendant. He's like, fuck this. I'm taking the pendant and I'm going to toss this sucker out the side. And we see Tetsuro stepping up where Maytel could not. Maytel could not pull the trigger, and she lived in indecision and regret in her own way. And the criticism that she imposed on Shadow, she was guilty of herself. And life is a mirror. We are always pointing out that the flaws in others that are deepest within ourselves.
What's very interesting is that first there's a thing we talk about Emeraldas showing up, and Emeraldas shooting at Prometheum's forces. She has this very vicious face, like she's really enjoying that.
Harlock does too.
But Emeraldas, you can see that there's almost a sadistic glee at shooting these people, and in fact, again, when you look at it from now, knowing that basically Prometheum, seeing that Emeraldas, her other daughter, would not be converted, tried to have her killed and exiled, and all this backstory for Emeraldas. You see in Space Symphony Metal, for instance. So if you take that came much later, but you have that in mind and you watch this scene, say, okay, so that's why she says it's payback time, finally.
Yeah.
In the animated series, in the ending, it's not Planet Metal at the end. It's Planet Prometheum, actually.
Okay.
And things unfold quite differently. And in the manga, it's also unfolds very differently in that it's neither Planet Metal or Planet Prometheum. It's Diandromeda, like in the Adieu Galaxy Express. And on this planet, Prometheum appears as this sort of two-faced being, which is Promethium on one side and Metal on the other side. So it is even more strange. And actually, you see Claire's mother, Meno, who actually realizes that she's been a jerk to her daughter and decides to help Tetsuro escape mechanization at the end. So you have a bit of a closure on that.
Redemption instead of what we have here.
And Metal has no indecision. She comes and she throws a pendant and saying, "It's over, mother, goodbye." So it's a bit different.
Little different there, yeah. And throwing that, we have our ultimate Deus Ex Machina, each platform falling one step behind. We find out, like you said, Julien, earlier, that Maytal confesses that she has the body of Tetsuro's mother, and that's how she's been traveling through time. They end up, succeeding. They get out and they get back on the 3-9, as is covered by the Queen Emeraldus, and everybody takes off. The Arcadia leaves, the Queen Emeraldus leaves, the 3-9 is able to escape. But somehow Promethium has ended up back on the train and is strangling Tetsuro, similar to how Shadow strangled him. Crystal Claire, comes back at the nick of time and somehow activates self-destruct mode on Queen Promethium, which just works. It just works. And basically this is some cold-blooded stuff, because we see later the conductor just kind of taking a dustpan and discarding of Claire into the universe. And we have some of Maytal's most, like, they find a tear-shaped piece of Claire, and Maytal's like, maybe that's her heart. And I'm like, I guess maybe that's her heart. That's like a lot of implication there, Maytal. We see Claire sacrifice herself. That's how she goes. But then we do our flybys. The Arcadia flies by. Goodbye to the crew of them. Queen Emeraldus passes by. Goodbye. And the 3-9 lands back on Earth. This is all wrapped up pretty neatly. She says she'll be back, but he won't recognize her the next time. It's like, she couldn't say to Tetsuro, like, "Oh, hey, it's me, it's Maytal, I got a new body. Like, hey, how you doing?" Seems to be a bit manipulative and weird. I don't know.
And again, it really does not make sense with all the people who have recognized Maytal if she is actually in Tetsuro's mother's body. So yeah, that's here. It seems a bit like they're throwing some stuff, hoping to close some plot holes, but actually creating bigger inconsistencies.
Yeah, it's definitely like, okay, movie's over, we gotta go. Let's get out of here. We're at 2 hours and 8 minutes, so we need to. And it's another thing, like, we could have sped things up here and there. We could have skipped this and that. It's not the perfect movie, but the sentiment just feels great. And we have the final kiss, the most inappropriate kiss, deep Maytal kiss on Tetsuro, the ultimate sort of sealing the deal on an Oedipal complex and Stockholm syndrome. Tetsuro follows quickly behind the train as it departs, and from now on, Tetsuro, I will live only in your memories. I will be nothing more than an illusion of a young boy's heart. And farewell, Galaxy Express 3-9. Farewell, days of youth. But we'll have some more days of youth in the future, it seems. And we end on a never-ending journey. Any closing thought?
Song, by the way.
Yeah. It's not my favorite song from it, but it was a hit. It was an absolute hit, like you said.
It's an earworm.
Yeah. Take you on and it's got like that never-ending. It's like the song that never ends on Lamb Chop. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
This is the song that. Anyways, so closing thoughts. Chad, why don't you start?
I mean, I pretty much went on about it at the beginning. I think that it's if you cut this movie any differently, it wouldn't have the same impact. As we were talking about before, there's definitely an Oedipus thing going on. I think that it was extremely formative for obvious reasons for how Tetsuro progresses throughout the rest of the Leijiverse. I'm a huge fan of Dimensional Voyage, so it's like, damn, that was cool. Just how he matures into his own version of a pirate at that point. But no spoilers at that point.
Okay.
I think I would still have to go ahead and read the manga to really see where Rintaro has his own influence here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the series, they all have their own flavor, it seems. So worth checking them all out. But this is great for just, you can sit down and do a whole story. And that's what makes it so potent of a gateway drug, in my opinion. But Julien, closing thoughts.
Well, I think it's rewatching it today. I really felt that production value at some point aside, it's a movie that has really aged pretty well. Especially now, thanks to Discodec Media in the US, we have a pretty cool Blu-ray version that looks great. But seeing it as a Blu-ray is really cool, and you can really it stood the test of time pretty well. And I think it's really interesting that they made it midway through the publication of the manga or the airing of the TV show, and you can feel that they basically put some of the famous incidents of the manga early on, like with Titan, with Antares. They introduce early what will be the ending of the story at the end, but they still manage to do that in a way that works and that's consistent, and that's at the end you're not like wow, I'm super frustrated like some other Matsumoto works can be at times. They manage to take not the easiest manga to adapt into a movie, and they manage to make a good movie out of it, and even a great movie at times.
I think the difficulties kind of spill out at the end, like we're talking about Crystal Clare being kind of weird there, and Maytel kind of for no good reason deciding to never be seen again, even though we quickly find out that's not going to be the case. She's always lying to us in one way or another. But my final thought being, just reiterating, if you have somebody that's curious about the Leijiverse, I think this is the quickest and easiest way to get them on board and understand. Yes, get that Blu-ray from Discotech, and what you'll really get from this is you get to be a young child on an adventure of a lifetime. You get to put yourself in that situation. You get to meet heroes. You get to beat enemies. You get to take out your frustrations. And you don't have to get too tied up in the troubles and worries of being an adult Harlock or being an adult Emeraldus, which most of the Harlock series and the Emeraldus series, they tend to get hung up on what it is to be that adult. But having that child that you focus on most of the time puts you on a much more free journey, a much more free-form journey, and you get to have a lot more excitement without the baggage, basically. I think it's a great starter. Any plugs? Julien, you're free to, and I know you mentioned it yesterday, but you can go ahead and mention it again. What do you do? What would you like to share with our audience?
Well, what can I plug? But still the same thing, actually.
Yeah, go ahead. Do it again.
That's my news. So I'm doing this pen and paper RPG called Lore and Legacy. I just released it in English. It's a science fantasy universe inspired by basically heavy metal and these kind of things, mixing science fiction and fantasy and adventure and sort of old school 70s feeling. Not really Matsumoto inspired, but I mean, I'm such a fan that Matsumoto finds its way in what I do, even if I don't realize it. Don't hesitate to check it out. You can find it on Drive-Thru RPG. Sorry, hard thing to pronounce for a Frenchman. Drive-Thru RPG, and I have a website, 999.
Yeah, triple-9.fr, an amazing resource. You can translate that right on the page to whatever language you like. And I just tagged you in the comments with Imperial Media Productions, which is your company, correct? Under which you published Lore and Legacy. So go support Julien, an amazing talent there. Chad, anything you'd like to share here?
Just, the meme page, Captain Harlock and the Arcadia.
If you're a fan of Moon Knight as well, which is an American comic book, go check out Into the Night, right? Which is Chad's other podcast.
Into the Night with a K, because it's Moon Knight.
Yes.
We're going on to, I think, episode 211 pretty soon.
Wow. Yeah, very prolific. And I'm going to plug my thing, Captain Hardluck. Go check out my Leijiverse inspired rap album. Yes, you heard me right. The first album is called The Leijiverse Volume 1, Friend Spaceship, and it's the story of Harlock and Totoro told in my own spin of the Ring of Time, where they're a bit more gangsta, shall we say. So please check that out. And thank you again, everybody, for listening. Julien, you must go. I know you must go. So thank you all so much for your time.
I'm starting to be a little bit hungry right now.
Oh no. Okay. I'm sorry. All right, we'll wrap.
It's 8. It's past 8 p.m. here in France. So,
I know,
but that's okay. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about the Leijiverse.
I think we just crashed or something. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Have a good one.
Bye.